Alright, welcome ladies and gents. Star Trek 4, movie that I've done loads of videos on. It's been interesting to watch this just sort of flip-flop through the years. However, one which caught a lot of people's attention in terms of early development was the idea of a story featuring Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine. So father and son, and how that would have worked. Now, this was basically the first iteration of the series falling apart at that point, because neither star was going to be paid what they were promised in contracts, thus they both walked away. Now, I don't think this is a big key loss, primarily because this was written by the Rings of Power showrunners, and because they're doing the rounds trying to, I guess, curry favour with the media to get people to stay interested in Rings of Power, they have now revealed the story details for the scrapped movie. And yeah, we're going to cover it. But again, they have they have essentially no writing credits before Rings of Power. And this was one of their things which they dropped in. And the only reason they got this gig would have been J.J. Abrams. And coincidentally, it's one of the only reasons they got the gig for Rings of Power was J.J. Abrams called Amazon. They've revealed that you can look that up yourself. They've literally come out and stated that themselves. J.J. Abrams put in a good word. So it says a lot, I think, to be honest, about their integrity, but also skill set. Where most, if not all, of the jobs that they get are based on the back of someone else putting in a good word, rather than merit. So let's take a look, right? This is just a random article. The original is a pretty long piece. It's on Esquire, which I don't really want to go into. I can't really be bothered. But this is the key bit that we are interested in. Patrick McKay, J.D. Payne went from writers with no official credits to The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. So they really had no credits, but they have written stuff. But they have no official credits to the showrunners of Rings of Power. But they also penned a version of Star Trek 4 for the Defenders director S.J. Clarkson. And similar to seemingly every other iteration of that sequel, it didn't become a reality. Now this article is like, oh, but losing this one really hurt. It didn't. It doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. And again, this was essentially one of the starting movies that we heard about that signified that Star Trek 4 was dead. So it would have obviously seen Chris Hemsworth return as George Kirk, the father of James Kirk. And the team up is one, obviously, loads of people quite liked the sound of it, but this was before Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne have revealed themselves to be incompetent, especially at storytelling. And they also reveal that here, by the way. It's all about nostalgia. It's always nostalgia, always building off of other things. No creation of their own. So here we have it, right, from McKay. I would love to tell you about it. We worked on a couple of Star Trek movies, and the one you're asking about, would have been the fourth in the franchise, reuniting Chris Hemsworth with Chris Pine. The conceit was that through a cosmic quirk in the Star Trek world, they were the same age. It was going to be a grandfather-son space adventure. And here we have it, by the way, this is where they... constant referential things. Think Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in space. That's right, ladies and gents. Just Indiana Jones. Remember that cool thing that you liked before? We're going to rip that off. And they've even said this now, moving forwards, about the season 2 of Rings of Power, that Sauron's going to be like Walter White. Just consistently referencing things because they can't create anything of their own. We were really thrilled about it. McKay added that they had created an original villain for Star Trek 4, saying that the script had, and this is another just constant referential, a really cool 2001 A Space Odyssey-esque sci-fi idea at the core. What, a giant baby floating in space, was it? No, of course not. If your movies, your scripts, anything that you're creating has to constantly be, you know, a referential vehicle for other things, it's not good by itself. You know, if you can be inspired by things, but if you have to consistently reference things, even when you're just talking about it, it says a lot about what you're creating, because it says a lot about the inception of the ideas. It just sounds like you're ripping stuff off. So they continued anyway and says, we worked on it for 2.5 years with Lindsay Webber, our non-writing executive producer on Rings of Power, and an amazing director, S.J. Clarkson. The movie eventually fell apart, and it really was a heartbreak for us. We would have loved to make that movie. So obviously, you know, how wouldn't it have broken canon? J.D. Payne drops in and goes, there's an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation called Relics, where they find Scotty, who's been trapped in a transporter for a couple of decades, and they're able to have cool adventures with him. Our conceit was, what if right before the Kelvin impacted with that huge mining ship, George Kirk had tried to beam himself over to his wife's shuttle, where his son, Jim Kirk, had just been born? And what if the ship hadn't completely exploded? What if it left some space junk? It sounds crap. So, hugely convoluted, and it's interesting that they do, you know, they literally say our conceit, and it is. It shows everything they're saying here is a huge amount of conceit. So it's interesting that they use that word. Anyway, think about when you send a text message and you've typed it out, but you haven't quite hit send. This is how they explain it. On the other side, they see those 3 little dots that someone has typed. It's like the transporter had absorbed his pattern up into the pattern buffer, but hadn't spit him out on the other side. It was actually a saved copy of him that was in the computer. That's right, Star Trek universe can just save copies of people now. I'm so glad this was never made. So the adventure is that Chris Pine and the crew of the Enterprise have to seek out the wreckage of the ship that his father died on because of a mystery and a new villain. In the ship, they stumble across his father's pattern. They beam him out, and he has no idea that no time has passed at all, and that he's looking at his son. Then the adventure goes from there. I think that, personally, I think that sounds really bad. I think that sounds terrible, and I'm very glad, very, very glad this didn't get made. Patrick McKay, J.D. Payne, not good. They're not good at what they do. They're not good writers. Consistently having to reference other things. It's not good. It's not a good look. It's bad. It just goes to show that your own product can't stand on its own 2 feet. And this sounds like a terrible idea. You can just save copies of people, basically. It's like hitting save on, I don't know, hitting delete on something and then turning off your computer at the same time. It'll just save it before it's deleted. It's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So we've got Picard, where he's walking around as a golem now, you know, or apparently he's not now. I don't even know. I don't watch Picard anymore. It's so garbage. I clicked off and never watched it again after season 1. And now this one, you can just save copies of yourself in a transporter. That sounds like crap. I'm so glad this never got made.